if the starch totally removed from the urinary bladder, what will happen? You know that because the urinary bladder, the starch is helps in the transferring the signal to the central nervous system, and the central nervous system sends signal to the urinary bladder for giving the pressure that helps in the pass out the urine from the urinary bladder. And you know that this process is known as the micturition. So the starch removal of the starch, if there is starch not present, no micturition will be occurred, okay, because for the micturition the presence of starch is very much important. In urine collects the urinary bladder, you know that the muscular walls of the bladder distend to accommodate it. The starch receptors of the wall bladder send signal to the central nervous system by stimulating the sensory nerve endings in the bladder. The starch helps to stimulating the sensory nerve system to send the signal to the central nervous system. It causes an ergo to pass out the urine. So, if the starch receptor are totally removed from the wall of the urinary bladder, no micturition will occur. Okay, this is the answer. Mainly for the micturition, because there is the central nervous system or the stimulating sensory nerve ending, both are depends on the work of the starch receptor. Alcohol or caffeine affect the concentration of urine. How the alcohol and caffeine helps in to affect the concentration of urine? Alcohol and caffeine, you know that alcohol is one type of material which helps to stimulate or induce the secretion of ADH hormone, antidiuretic hormones. Caffeine also work with the antidiuretic hormone, ADH hormone, and sodium helps in the sodium reabsorption. Both are helps in the dilution of urine. If alcohol and caffeine are not present, the dilution of the urine will not occur. Okay. Alcohol inhibits the release of ADH hormone, and caffeine interferes with the ADH action and sodium reabsorption. Thus, both these dilute the urine. Such compound having the ability to dilute the urine are called diuretic substances. So, caffeine and alcohol both are called diuretic substances. If both are not present, antidiuretic hormone will not be secreted, and that does not help in the dilution of the urine. Complete? Clear everyone? Next one. Mention the factors which affect the oxygen hemoglobin binding. There are so many factors are present which helps in the oxygen with the hemoglobin, carbon dioxide with the hemoglobin. So, how they form the oxyhemoglobin or carbaminohemoglobin? Okay, some factors. Remind that in the both cases, binding of the carbon dioxide or oxygen both are depends on the mainly pressure and temperature. Okay. So, first one temperature, second one partial pressure, PO2, PCO2, both are, if there is no difference between the PO2 or PCO2, no binding will be occur, okay. So, first one temperature, second one partial pressure of O2, third one partial pressure of CO2, and fourth one the hydrogen ion concentration. Hydrogen ion concentration also an important material for the carbaminohemoglobin or oxyhemoglobin formation, okay. Suppose the terminal ends of axon are in contact with dendrites of 3 adjacent neurons. Which direction will the nerve impulse of the axon follow? You know that axon also has the terminal ends. That is some swelling part that is known as the axon terminal. And axon terminal binds with the dendrite and the 3 nervous system. So obviously the signal goes through the axon to the 3 type of nervous system. Okay. So the axon ends with many swelling called axon terminals. These terminals neuron may make contact with the dendrites of other neurons. The nerve impulse of axon will travel in all these 3 neurons or nerves. The terminal end of axon are in contact with the dendrites of 3 adjacent neurons. If axon are in contact with the 3 adjacent neurons of the dendrite, the signal follow from the axon terminal ends to the 3 nervous systems of the dendrites. Okay, clear? Next one, the decalcification of bones is necessary before their study. Why? Comment. Why the decalcification of bones is necessary? No, anyone? You know that the most important part of the bone is calcium, and calcium is the hardest part. If calcium is present, you never study about the living cells of the bones. So you must have to remove the calcium, or you have to do the decalcification before study of the bones. Okay? So the bones have excessive calcification, so it is difficult to studying living cells in untreated bones. For their study, the bones are first decalcified in the same way as architecture of matrix is studied after dyeing up of the living materials. Okay? Decalcification, why important? Clear? Next one, tell me one similar. This is very easy. Srijita, Sagnik, anyone give the answer? 2 similarities between aves and mammals. Give me 2 similarities between the aves and mammals. Aves and mammals, both are homeothermic, both have the ability to maintain their internal temperature, both are 4-chambered heart. So this is very easy. Similarity between aves and mammals, their body also covered by the skin. So aves and mammals are homeothermous animals, have the ability to maintain their internal body temperature. They are extra embryonic membrane. They are warm blooded. Yes, correct. Turtle and Pila. Similarities between turtle and Pila. Both of them contain hard shell. Both of them are poikilothermic or cold-blooded. Okay, turtle and Pila. Frog and crocodile. Both of them are poikilothermic or cold-blooded. Both of them are tetrapod. They have 4 limbs. So aves and mammals, turtle and Pila, frog and crocodile, similarities. Tell me some general characteristic features of cartilaginous fish. What is the characteristic features of the cartilaginous fish? First, they must have a cartilaginous, so endoskeleton must be present. Skeleton system cartilaginous, that is the hard bones are must be present, endoskeleton must be present. Second one, their body are cold-blooded, poikilothermic. Third one, their tail are heterocercal. Fourth one, they have their placoid scales. So many, yes, 2-chambered heart, 2-chambered auricle and 1 ventricle. 1 auricle, 1 ventricle. Tail fin heterocercal. So this is the endoskeleton present. They are cold-blooded, mostly marine. Their skin is tough, covered by the placoid scale. Heart is 2-chambered, 1 auricle, 1 ventricle, and tail fin is heterocercal. This is the characteristic features of the cartilaginous. A person visited agricultural field, okay, and observed that the growth yield of sugarcane crop is very low, and discuss application of some PGRS. PGRS mean plant growth regulators. Plant growth regulators, that is the plant hormone which helps in the growth of the plant, differentiation, repairing, all these things that is regulated by the plant that is known as the plant growth regulator. So if one cultivate the sugarcane but they did not get the desired amount of the product, so what should they do? Okay, that is the question. What is PGR? PGR means plant growth regulators. That plant hormone helps in the low concentration, regulate the growth, differentiation, development, or promoting or inhibiting of the plants. Okay, so plant growth regulators are the plant hormone that helps in the very low concentration. They can helps to maintain the growth, repairing, damaging, that is the development, promoting, inhibiting, all these things are regulated by the plant growth regulators. Example of plant growth regulators: gibberellin, auxin, cytokinin. Next question is that how can yield of sugarcane be increased? How the growth of sugarcane will be increased? Gibberellin. Gibberellin is the one of the plant growth regulator that helps in the growth of the plant properly. Okay. So gibberellin can be used for the longitudinal growth of the plants, that helps in the longitudinal growth of a plant. Spraying sugarcane crop with gibberellin increase the length of the stem, thus increase the yield by as much as 20 ton per acre. So if you spray the gibberellin, that helps in the length, growth of the stem or the length of the plant, that is longitudinal growth of the plant. So you can get the desired amount of the plant's crops. Okay, clear everyone? Next question: what name the physical properties of water on which transpiration depends that derives the ascent of xylem sap? What is the physical properties of the water that helps in the transpiration? Because you know that the water, the food material through the xylem or phloem, that has to go the higher part of the plants, that is totally opposite to the gravitational force. So how they reach at that part? Obviously there must be some properties are present in the water, so that's why the water has the ability to go as high as the plant. Okay, so the process of transpiration depends on the following physical properties of the water. So three properties must be present in the water: cohesion, adhesion, and surface tension. These three properties of water helps in the transportation of the water through the xylem sap. Cohesion. What is cohesion? Cohesion is the mutual attraction between the water molecules. Water molecules attached with each other by the cohesion, that is the mutual attachment. Adhesion is the attraction of the water molecules to the polar surface. Okay, polarity, that helps in the polarity. And surface tension, water molecules are attracted to the each other in the liquid phase more than the water in gaseous phase. So that is the surface tension. If the water molecule is present in the liquid phase, they attached as much as they does not attach in the gaseous form. So there must be water must be present in the liquid form. These properties give water high tensile strength, ability to resist a pulling force, and high capillarity, ability to rise in the tubes. The plant's capillarity is added by the small diameter of the tertiary elements, the tracheids and the vessels elements. So these three these three characteristics helps the water, gives the high pulling density, high capillarity, that can goes through a tube like structure, because vessels are tube like structures. Clear? Next question: discuss the variation in the stomatal number of isobilateral and dorsiventral leaves. Two types of leaves, isobilateral and dorsiventral. So what is the difference between them in the stomata number? Isobilateral leaf you can see mostly in the monocot, that is grass like. So you know that their leaves are isobilateral. So they have the equal number of the stomata on the upper surface, on the lower surface, both. Okay. In the case of the isobilateral leaf, the stomata are present in equal number in the both upper and lower surface. But in the case of the dorsiventral leaf, that present mainly in dicot, two seed. Okay. You can see that they have the more amount of the stomata on the lower surface compared to the upper surface. They have the more number of the stomata in the lower surface of the leaves, but the upper surface of the leaves contain the less number of the stomata in the case of the dorsiventral leaf. This is the differences. Next question. Fruit is a mature or ripened ovary. Obviously, most of the fruit is the ripened ovary that transfer into the fruits. Okay. So, what is false fruit and what is true fruit? False fruit means that fruit, first true fruit. True fruit means the fruit totally developed from the ripened ovary. And false fruit means the different parts of the ovary along with the ovary, they transform into the fruit except ovary. Except ovary, all parts can be transformed into the fruit. That is known as the false fruit. Okay, that is apple, and true fruit mango. Apple is mostly pericarp. So true fruit and false fruit. Fruit which develop from fertilized ovary are called true fruits. Example, mango. False fruit, fruits which develop from any part of flower along with the ovary, that is called false fruit. That is apple. Next question. In some fruit like mango, the pericarp is well differentiated into three layers. You can see that there is the three layers because the outer portion in the mesocarp that we can take as a food, the endocarp, that is the, you can say that seed are present. So what is the three part of the pericarp? You can find it in the true fruits. The three parts of the pericarp is differentiated into epicarp, mesocarp, endocarp. Endocarp is the middle part, internal part. Mesocarp means middle part, and epicarp means outer layer, external layer. Okay. Muscles generally get fatigue, but red muscles fibers can work for a prolonged period. Validate the statement. Why the red muscles, all the muscles, after sometimes doing the work, the muscles get fatigue, they have some pain because lactic acid accumulation occurs. But why that does not occurs in the red muscles? Because you know that all the muscles, they are if we do the heavy work, if you do some running, you can feel that some pain in your muscle, because the oxygen, the energy that present in your muscle, you are totally use that. So that's why on that area anaerobic respiration started, so lactic acid accumulation occurs. If you get some rest, when the oxygen restore, then the lactic acid remove and you can also work again. But in the case of the red muscle, there is myoglobulin is present, and this myoglobulin is the oxygen reservoir. So as much as oxygen is present, you can do that work, so there is a less chance of the get fatigue the red muscles. Okay. In continuous contraction and relaxation in muscles continue for longer duration, then lactic acid start accumulating in the muscles. The accumulation of lactic acid leads to muscle fatigue and pain is the experienced. However, red muscles fibers have oxygen reservoir in the form of myoglobulin. Anaerobic conditions are not created if there is oxygen is present. So why the anaerobic condition created? So it avoid muscles fatigue and can contract the longer period due to the fatigue. Okay. Write down 3 differences between the respiration and combustion. What is the difference between the respiration and combustion? Respiration is the breakdown of complex food into the simple food by the release of energy. Okay, so it is the breakdown of complex compounds through oxidation within the cell, leading to the release of considerable amount of energy. What is combustion? Combustion is completing burning of organic compounds. That is not breakdown or digestion anything, that is burning. Okay, that is the organic compound leads to production of CO2 and H2O, yield energy. Second differences, it is respiration totally controlled stepwise biochemical process. Obviously it is a biochemical process. Combustion is uncontrolled physiochemical process. It is a physical, you burn something, that is physical process. Respiration, several intermediate products are formed during the process of respiration. Combustion, no intermediate products are formed during the process of combustion. In respiration, energy is released several stages throughout the process. Obviously from starting to glycolysis, so how much ATP is produced, and each step they can produce the ATP. So in various steps they can produce energy, but in combustion energy is released only once after burning everything. Respiration does not require external heat carry on the process. Obviously combustion initiated external heat is given, you have to burn this, and enzymes are involved, no enzymes are involved in the combustion. Okay, combustion actually totally burning process, and respiration is totally breakdown, that is the biological process, and it is a physical process. Okay, clear everyone? So this is up to for the today. We will continue my rest of the part in my next video. Okay, we will obviously discuss more question. Bye everyone.